Hello and welcome to you all to the very latest edition of the Avexis Engage webinar series. My name is Ollie Matthews and I'm part of the team here at Avexis. And today we're going to be exploring a couple of topics that are very, very close to my own heart, innovation and commercialization. If that wasn't exciting enough, I'm also very excited about the guest that we have joining us today, who is going to be able to bring some genuine expertise to the discussion. But I'm going to tease you a little bit before introducing them properly with a little bit of housekeeping. Today, we're using a slightly different approach for our webinar. Those of you who have joined our previous webinars will know that usually the approach we take for Q&A is that you type them into the platform itself. However, today we're using another one of our webinar delivery approaches, which means if you want to ask any questions at all, please just simply use the chat in the media player. So you should see a button just at the bottom of the page that says chat to open that window up. And you can use that there. As always, please don't wait till the end to get your questions in. We want to hear from you at all times throughout the session, and we'll weave your comments into the discussion as we go. So please ask early and ask often. Of course, if you would like to know anything more about our different webinar options and how our clients use them, please just drop me a line and we can chat some more. Okay, that was a shameless plug, and we'll move on into the really interesting stuff and the interesting people. So as we are all well aware, the pressures on associations today are more complex than ever before. Broad economic pressures impacting both organizations and individuals, increasing expectations, and a very competitive marketplace mean that associations need to be at their very, very best to thrive. Two areas that are crucial to success are innovation and commercial acumen. And while there are some great examples out there of associations really embracing these, there are perhaps too many situations where associations struggle to really master these areas. And that is a big problem. To help us explore these topics in more detail is our guest today, Jodie Long. Jodie is a successful and well-respected leader in both the association and commercial sectors. And we're very lucky to have her here today. Jodie, good morning, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me here.
So look, before we dig in, we've got a few questions and a bit of a discussion to go through. But before we dig into that, can you just share a little bit of background to yourself and your experience, and I guess, sort of why innovation and commercialization sort of matter to you?
Yeah, sure. So, look, I originally started out my career journey actually as a radiographer, but I worked for Siemens Healthcare, so a massive, big corporate entity for 11 years, and really got my grounding there with regards to commercialization, technology, innovation, and spent quite a bit of my time there transforming the different divisions that I was responsible for, which led to efficiencies and improvement and growth of businesses. I've also done the same thing consulting with medical imaging sites, and for the last 7 years I've actually been a CEO of associations, and really during that time my strengths and I guess my specialty is really around improving the performance of the associations, making sure that they remain relevant, that they are competitive, that they're financially sound, because that ensures then that they can really serve their members and fulfill their mission at the end of the day.
That's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that has always struck me, like you and I have spoken about before as well, is that perception that profit and growth are almost dirty words when it kind of comes to the non-profit world. I assume you don't agree. Why do you think that is the case, though? Why do you think that it actually those ideas of commercialization and profit are not at the heart of associations?
Look, I think it's unfortunate that the word not for profit conjures up that you shouldn't be making money. But not for profit is really just a tax status at the end of the day. And I really prefer, that they are for purpose organizations, so you've got a purpose, you've got a vision, and you need to deliver on that. And members sign up, to be a part of that, and they want to get value from it. to be able to provide value for members and deliver on your vision and your mission, you need money, unfortunately, in the world. And look, I use a bit of an analogy that we can all liken ourselves to. There are people in the world who live paycheck to paycheck. Yep. So the money coming in is the same that the money is going out. But there are people who set aside some money because they want to go on an overseas trip, or they want to, buy a house. And so they set aside some money to be able to invest in those important things that matter to them. They are making a profit. They are making a surplus. And it is no different to a not-for-profit that you want to set aside some money so that you can then invest in some key projects that you want to do in the future. Website, database, you want to develop an app, you want to invest in research for your organization. And second to that, you also need a bit of a buffer. We all know that your car can break down or something can happen and you need some funds to be able to support you. And it's the same with any organization. And I think it's just unfortunate that that word profit symbolizes with people replace purpose with profit. The purpose of the organization isn't to make money. The purpose is to deliver on the mission. It's just that you can't do that without money.
Yeah. And it's like you say, it's a kind of a slight shift, but an important one in mindset, where you go like, not for profit is a tax status rather than being a business model. Yeah, I think that's an interesting sort of interesting point to kick things off with. Do you see that changing though? I mean, I guess, do you see that there has been a trend over the last 5 or 10 years or so that actually more people are shunning that sort of older way of thinking, or is that still pretty well embedded that actually no, we're not for profit. It's not about commercial growth. It's about just serving the community and about education and sort of legislation.
Look, I think it would depend upon the association, absolutely, as to where they are, perhaps in a journey of commercial. We use the word commercialization, but maybe let's just go back to. I'll go back to, I guess, the definition. Maybe again that there's that profit, but really, you spoke about commercial acumen. Commercial acumen really, to me, means that you actually understand your business and you understand where your costs are coming from. It means then you can prioritize, and it means that you can, and I've used graphs like this before, impact. Yep, you want to create a massive high impact, but you want to be able to do it that is cost effective, so that you are using the least amount of money and time to be able to achieve the highest impact. And that's how you prioritize what you do. We would all love to be able to do everything, but we can't. But you can do anything, you just can't do everything. And so that prioritization is really, really important. Yeah.
And on that, and it's getting sort of maybe a little bit practical, but hopefully that's useful for the audience. How do you do prioritization? Because that makes perfect sense from a theory point of view. How do you turn that into, right, here's all the things we could do, let's prioritize it?
Yeah, so data is really, really important. Yeah. So how do you work out what is the priority in terms of what's going to have the highest impact? Yeah. What are the members saying? What are the members saying? What are they asking for? What's really important to the members in terms of having a big impact? And also with regards to your own strategy and your own vision and mission, what's really important in terms of having an impact and delivering on your strategy? But you need information with regards to how much is this going to cost, and how much is this going to cost me in terms of money, but also time. How many staff, how much resourcing am I going to have to invest in order to deliver what I'm delivering? And for me, that is really, really important in being able to make sure that you are making decisions that are the most cost-effective decisions for the benefit of the purpose, but also to the member. And I used to always use the I know politicians use this, but the pub test, right? At the end of the day, it's members' money. Yeah. So if we're going to be spending members' money on this project or this thing, is that something that members go, yep, you know what, I'm happy to have my money invested in that? Or, nah, that's really not that important to me. Well, if it's not that important to them, why are we doing it?
Mm, mm. I think that why kind of test is really important. I know, and this is sort of going back a couple of years, but I remember chatting with you about some of the decisions you made around conference at sonographers, and decisions in terms of do we record sessions or not? Do we stream sessions or not? That kind of aspect that comes up a lot when people are planning an event, particularly budgeting for an event as well. And I remember you linking very clearly between those decisions, which are really operational decisions, but linking that very clearly to a strategic priority.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we go back, I'll go back a step too. We did make some decisions, but we were also able to make some decisions because we had put some money aside in the bank.
Yes.
So you can make savings here, there, and everywhere, and we can talk about that later, how you can go about that. But we had some money set aside. So when we were looking at conferences and the hybrid world, the online world took off during COVID, but then we were getting slowly back to normal, and a lot of associations went, you're right, straight back to, no, it's just going to be face-to-face, no more hybrid activity. But we made a conscious decision not to throw away the hybrid environment. And you're right, particularly for one area, and that was that we had gained quite big international reach through having that hybrid ability. We had a relationship with Radiology Across Borders, and so to be able to reach all of those countries, we needed a hybrid experience. We were talking quite a lot with Singapore. How do we reach, Singapore? And so it really tied in to our strategic plan, into how we wanted to position ourselves as leaders in sonography across the world. And we operationalized that, but we did have some money in the bank to be able to do that.
But I think, and not trying to be too, cliched or after school special, but surely a great example of how prudent, profitable planning allowed approach to purpose. That mission was to sort of to grow internationally and to stand out internationally and set the standard overseas, and you were able to sort of help achieve that because you had planned and sort of then invested in an idea to see if that could be achieved. I think that's perfect. Yeah. So look, we talk a little bit there. It all sounds very rosy. It all sounds kind of obvious and that. But as we know, theory and reality sadly are different things. In your experience, what are those things that stop us turning the good, exciting theory into the sort of the practical delivery? What are kind of those obstacles that get in the way?
Yeah, look, I think I'm going to bookend this answer because it's so important. I'll say it at the start and say it at the end. Mindset is probably one of the biggest things, thinking differently. And I'll touch on that then at the end. Obviously, for associations, we're a bit resource constrained as well. We have to do things on a limited budget, and obviously that can hinder some innovation. But I'll also go back to innovation. Innovation, people suddenly think, oh my God, I need all this whiz-bang technology and I need to invest and buy all this technology. Innovation simply means doing something new. Finding out what other people are doing, what's best practice, and doing something new and different. Yeah. And there are ways that you can do that without it costing the world. Associations have legacy systems and processes, and obviously that can be very challenging. The gap to upgrade can be quite substantial with regards to cost, staff training, a lot of associations aren't very sophisticated when it comes to understanding how to, I guess, do a tech integration or new tech integration. But I think if we go back to that mindset or culture, if you want to call it, associations tend to be a little bit risk adverse. Now, I understand being risk adverse, you're accountable to the members and using their money, but that can stifle new ideas. It can create a fear of failure, even for you to even experiment. The way that we also govern, and by that I mean that associations can often have complex governance structures where decision making is slow. So we don't operate in a very agile environment, or not all associations do, and so that can hinder innovation as well. But I guess one of the biggest things when we talk about culture is you talk about resistance to change. People are comfortable often with the status quo, and they may be resistant to adopting those new ways of working.
And I mean, I would imagine a lot of our audience are sort of nodding along, going, "Yeah, recognize that, recognize that." How do you go about overcoming those obstacles? Because, like you say, it's not. There are skills, there are techniques you can learn to help sort of structure innovation or experimentation, like that. But that mindset one, that culture one, that's not a switch that you can just flick. So how do you go about that? How do you go about nudging that culture, nudging that mindset along?
Yeah, and look, that does take time. Yeah.
Mm.
You need strong leadership. So from the board CEO, through your leaders of your organization, where there's a clear vision, and clear, this is where we're going and this is why we're doing it. So you're leading from the top. And so it's about promoting that culture of innovation, empowering staff to bring forward ideas, encouraging them that it's, okay to experiment, culture of continuous improvement, continually asking questions. Why do we need to do it that way? Is there a better way? Have we thought about a better way? And I think embedding that people look outside the organization for best practice as well, and questioning everything. And I think it does take time. I will just say something that I've learned over time as well is sometimes we think it's the resistance to the change. The change is simply the response that we're doing to an opportunity or challenge. That's been identified.
Yeah.
And actually what I've come to realize is that often it's not the resistance to the change, it's the resistance to the opportunity or the challenge that's presented, and getting people to understand that there is a challenge, I say opportunity, I much prefer the word opportunity to challenge, but there are challenges, and often people don't like to hear that there are challenges, whether it be financially that there's some challenges, whether it be that members are unhappy with certain things that are going on. I prefer to look at it as an opportunity. Often it is making sure that everyone understands the challenge, and then the change is actually your response to find the solution. And I think getting everyone to buy in, to understand the challenges, to understand the opportunities, and then the change process does become a lot easier.
Yeah, it connects to there's it was an interesting thing I read recently around innovation, and it was talking around kind of something that connects to what you're just talking about there, was that people are understandably risk averse, but not only that, if people don't have kind of skin in the game, then they are much less likely to take any risk. It's like, well, there's really no upside. There's, to your words, there's no opportunity here. There's only potential downside for me as an individual or us as an organization and like that. So I think, thinking about what you're saying there, there's something in using that mindset piece to give people a sense of ownership and feel like, no, this is, this is something we're creating together. We have skin in the game here. We can make these things better. And then once people have got a genuine feeling of like, actually, I'm invested in this, then that idea they become a little bit more comfortable with the risk, because there is something they can lose, but there's also something they can kind of gain as well. And that just slight psychological shift can be really powerful. But like you say, that's then got to come from the top. That needs to be a really coherent, consistent message, and not just message, but word and deed. You can't be like, hey, let's be innovative, and then someone tries something like, don't do that, put that down. And with that in mind, then that you used the word experiment earlier, which I think is a great term. Any kind of practical examples with experimentation, with trying things, limiting the risk and exposure kind of thing that you can share? Because I think experimentation is crucial to innovation.
Yeah, and I'm trying to probably a few examples of experimentation. One, the biggest risk that I would have taken would have been when we did was in 2020 when we did the virtual conference. We had would have been about, so we were due to have the face-to-face conference in May. Obviously that got pulled, and then we made the decision that, looking back at why we exist, what are we providing? Our role as the association was to provide members with opportunities for professional development. That was one of the things that we were, it's core to our purpose. Yeah. Okay, well then we need to find a way to be able to do that. Yeah. And sitting in a room with all of my, key stakeholders, and they went, particularly my events manager, went out looking, this is what we could do. This is what we could do. We could use this platform. What if we did it this way? What if we did it that way? What if we did it this way? We'd set dates, was probably started in the conversation in April, May. The date was October. We had no idea in May what that was going to look like in October. No idea whatsoever. Yeah. Now, again, we did have some flexibility with some, funds, that it wasn't, we weren't going to suddenly go into the, become insolvent or anything like that. But we had no idea in terms of how many people would even, think that this was valuable. How many people, we used to get 1,500 attend a conference in Sydney. Would we get 300, 400 online? How many would we get? What would that look like? How would presenters work? How would sponsors work?
Yeah.
And so I couldn't do it myself. Yes, there was a direction, but I needed the team to buy into the vision of, we are going to provide our members with some form of conference, some form of event online that they can attend. Yeah, it's a risk. And I had to get the board on board with that. And they were, Jodie, you're taking a risk. You're taking a big risk. And I said, it is a big risk. I can't tell you what it's going to look like. But I can tell you that we're not going to die trying and wondering. Yeah. And we had over 1,000 attended.
Fantastic.
And it was probably one of the most successful, an amazing thing to pull off, considering 6 months before we had no idea what we were going to do. No, it may not have, but I mean, it was very successful. But sometimes you've got to go with your purpose, and that was the end goal, was to deliver something to our members.
And we've said it before, but it keep coming back to it, is that was driven by, that was, North Star was the purpose. Yes, it was something you were able to do an experiment with because of the funds that are available, but and there was a risk appetite there, but totally driven by purpose. going to start sort of weaving in a few of the questions that people are asking
Okay.
as
Yep.
well. And I think this is a good time actually, because it'd be interesting to hear um, if you've got any experience with experimenting from that data side of things. You mentioned earlier how important data is.
Yeah.
And I think, you and I have joked before about, you kind of every single conference at the moment has at least one session on data and the importance of data. And I know I've sat in them and gone, yes, this is fantastic, and scribbling down notes. And then you get back to the office, back to the inbox, back to the to-do list, and nothing really changes. Any thoughts on data, how to use data, particularly sort of any advice on how to experiment with getting more from data?
Yeah, look, data is really, really important. I can't stress how important it is to understand your members. However you look, everybody's different. Some people, some associations are very sophisticated in the ways that they can get data. They can afford to have big member surveys, etc. I mean, it can be as simple as phoning members. It could be, however you get your intel. It's really, really important to understand your members. It's really, really important as well to understand the services that you're delivering and how they're resonating. Yeah. So I think I mentioned at the start, sure whether maybe that was to you offline, Ollie, but there when I started at ASA, there were events that were attracting like 7 or 8 people, and we're like, well, why is that? There are other events that are attracting 30 similar events. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
And you could have surveyed the 7 people that attended. That's great. They loved it, etc. But why are others not attending? And when I started, I asked the question, so where are all the members located? Yeah, where are your members located? And yes, they had a postcode of all of the members, but I'm like, well, but how can we map these? And I had an intern, and she I asked her to look externally. I said, so surely there's a way that we can do this, some geographical thing. And we found a software license. We could sign up for a free trial for a month. And so we used it for a month, and we could get it to work with I think we had to download into spreadsheets information based on the members. But it mapped it all across Australia and New Zealand, and it mapped big heat maps of, where, the clusters of all of our members were. And we could then draw lines, say 100 kilometres from different towns. And so we use that. We cut the free sign off after a month, but we use that to be able then to map our events. We could use that then to personalized communication. We leveraged off that really significantly. And those events I was talking about where you got 7 or 8 people show up, that's because within a 100-kilometre radius, there were only 10 people. And so that was really, really, invaluable, and such a cost-effective way to utilize data that we already had, but to be able to put it into a meaningful format for us then to be able to make decisions.
Yeah. And look, that's a great example, isn't it? Because it totally changes the conversation, doesn't it? Because, you start off and like you say, you're getting 7 people to an event. You think this is a disaster. 7 people, we've ordered thousands of sandwiches. This is out of control. But then actually what you're actually doing is getting 70, 80% of the potential audience is attending. You're like, that's a completely different thing. This is an incredibly successful event in terms of capturing the potential audience. Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. That sounds successful and particularly sort of cost effective. How else do you judge success, and how do you kind of, I guess, if there are failings, how do you then learn from them moving forward? Because not every experiment's going to succeed.
No, absolutely not. And it's about feedback and adaptation. Yep. So we spoke about before about an agile working environment. It's really important that culture element of embedding that. I mean, it all goes down to culture at the end of the day, but embedding that into your organization, constantly feeding back. Yep. And then you can adapt. Yep. You are never going to get it right. every time,
Mm.
and nothing, there's no perfect event, there's no perfect anything. And so that learning mentality of constantly trying to get more and more, feedback, adapting, constantly looking at different ways of doing things. It may be that I know you come out with a new product or a new service or whatever it is, and that you've done that based on obviously some data and intel, etc., and you've come up with a new product or new service that hasn't quite hit the market. Now you could just go, nah, didn't work,
Yeah.
or you can look at it and go, okay, so why isn't it working? Right? Did we market it enough? Do people really understand what we're selling, what product that we're delivering? Is this going to take more time to get people to understand and to buy in and to really learn from this? And I think part of that is, well, not necessarily giving up immediately. It's about understanding, and really that curiosity mindset of, okay, it's not quite worked how we thought it would. Why is that? How can we adapt it? How can we tweak it? How can we change it, etc. And continuing to make improvements. I did have a quote here as well, and I've used this before. I think it's really important to understand that in a single year, if you do 1%, every day, you get better 1% every day. By the end of the year, you'll be 37 times better than you were at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Not 37%, 37 times better. And so that's a really important thing as well, is that,
That's crazy.
sometimes you don't need to come up with the whole big, amazing big changes. It can just be those little tweaks along the way, and then all of a sudden, you've changed something significantly.
And that's back to your point about innovation doesn't mean you have to invent the iPhone every time to be successful.
No, and I've said that to my staff on numerous occasions. I'm like, if you have come up with some original idea, then I need you to resign. I need you to go and patent that idea and go and sell it.
Yeah.
No longer work here. If you've come up with some unique thing that nobody else has thought of. Being innovative is understanding what's best practice, what other say associations or businesses are doing, or what is a different way or something new that we can bring into our association.
And again, that kind of, to me anyway, that harks back to your piece around culture and mindset as well. I want to come back to that in a second because I've got a couple of questions to ask you on that, but we've got a couple more questions coming in from the audience. So thank you very much, everyone. Please do keep the questions coming in. Next question is around the that kind of graph you mentioned earlier around high impact versus cost effectiveness. And the question is, do you have a particular yardstick that you use to run with a project?
That might depend on that'll probably depend on the association, depends on risk appetite. It would depend on a number of factors within your organization. Also depends on how financially sound you are as well, and the resources that you have with regards to staffing and how much you can deliver. I think it's important you can, when I say I use that graph, I absolutely use that graph. Anything that has high impact and low cost, low time, money, effort, absolutely goes top of the list. Yeah. And you can, if you've got initiatives or you've got things that you want to do, then I would encourage you, particularly if you've got to say you've got a strategic plan and then you've got an operational plan that sits with that. You've got a whole lot of things that you want to do in that operational plan. Well, you can prioritize them based on impact and then how much that's going to cost, whether it be staffing, whether it be money, and you can then prioritize. Yeah. And I guess that's how I've kind of, done prioritization. Now, having said that, there may be a strategic reason as to why you want to do something that might not have such a high, there might be something that has a slightly more higher cost and slightly less impact, but there is a specific strategic reason for doing that. And perhaps that's more of a long-term impact rather than short-term impact. But I think associations can often fall into the trap of trying to be all things to all people,
Yeah.
trying to do everything. Yeah, we are limited with regards to the resources that we have, and so that prioritization is actually really, really important, because if you are doing things that are very, very have a high cost but low impact, and you're doing a lot of things that are like that's not going to benefit anybody.
I can imagine that being a really interesting exercise. I mean, not just for associations, but for kind of all companies to do. Like, here's the things we're doing currently. Here's all the things we could be doing that we're kind of interested and excited about, and kind of mapping them together. I can imagine there being a few sort of aha moments of, hang on, we are spending quite a bit of time and effort on something that's not really having an impact here.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to make, and leaders and boards have to make hard decisions. Yeah.
But like you say, at least if they're driven by data and discussion and that genuine, like, no, this is the thing that's going to create the impact. This is the thing that's going to help us achieve our purpose. So it always comes back to that kind of Northern Star.
Yeah, and it allows a really good, robust conversation about what initiatives and what things you want to do.
Yeah. So the next question, it's that time of year. We're getting close to Jingle Bells and things like that. Still coming to terms with Christmas being in the summer. Still confuses me quite a lot from London. But it is that time of year when we start looking ahead, and we have sort of bold predictions for the next 12 months. So for you, what are some of those challenges that you foresee for the next 12 months for associations?
Look, they're probably maybe not hugely different to what we've experienced in the last little while. I think one of the things that I've noticed probably, and particularly if there's an election coming up, is that quite often now, I say regulatory changes, but policy changes or regulatory changes or changes that are happening kind of in that sphere, they're happening much more quickly than they ever used to.
Okay.
And so that then, if you're an association, being able to be agile enough to be able to adapt to some of those changes that are occurring would put you on the front foot. Yeah. And again, that comes down to an ability of an organization to be agile enough to be able to respond like that. But in terms of challenges, I think I use the word, I don't know whether anyone else has heard of the word VUCA world. We all live in this VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Yeah. And that's not going to change.
Yeah.
And so everyone's expectations, people's expectations are changing constantly. We're constantly, wanting things now. All of that is very hard to manage if your operations of your organization are not agile and not being able to move at pace, because the world's moving at pace. Yep, and you are going to fall further and further behind. I think one of the biggest things that perhaps we haven't seen the full effect of is competition.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is that, particularly pre-COVID, if we think of professional education and say events, networking, professional education, associations pretty much had a tight rein on that, in terms of they were the primary source, of the CPD for their profession or their members. Well, that world has changed, and there are now so many alternatives for professional growth, networking, learning. We're on a webinar here, different. That competitive landscape has changed, and associations business models did rely on events very, very heavily, face-to-face events, and structures of organizations in terms of staffing and all of that were all set up for face-to-face events. And so I think that is going to play out even more in terms of what that looks like for associations. I know that a number of associations over the past year to 2 years, that area of the business is not performed as well as it used to.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think that competition as well is coming from so many different angles. Their competition, threats, challenges, whatever it is, it's coming from so many different angles that I think it's quite tough to kind of keep up with. But I guess, like you say, it comes back to being able to be super clear about the purpose, about being able to have some of those resources, both skills and financial, sort of within the business, then to allow you to respond, but also that kind of commitment to agility.
Yep.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me then back to that question around mindset and culture. As a leader, how do you do that? So, if you've got 2 minutes, please, that'd be great. No, but like, how do you do that? Is it the stand up at the beginning of the year and, hi everybody, we're going to be an innovative organization moving forward, it's all about innovation? Is it the sort of the quarterly innovation workshops? It's like, how do you do that? How do you kind of really drive that cultural change?
Look, I think there absolutely needs to be transparency on what you're trying to achieve. But this takes time, but it is around, again, leading from the top, but asking, how can we do this better? How can we? Why do we have to do it this way? Why can't we do it another way? And if you as the leader are asking those questions in meetings, and you're asking those questions of your managers, then you're asking your managers to ask those questions of their staff. Then you try and embed that culture of continuing to not accept the status quo. On the numbers side, and I found this quite important, not everyone loves numbers. Absolutely, they don't, in terms of commercial, acumen, and that people glaze over as soon as you start talking about that. But you can simplify the numbers, and you start embedding that into your conversations. Yep, having at not every week, obviously, but at staff meetings or at management meetings, etc., that there is a discussion on how you are performing financially. That if you are talking about your conference or you're talking about an event, that there is a financial element that's attached to it as well. And so that starts to become just part of the conversation, that you're not looking at something purely from yes, you're looking at it from impact, but you're also trying to get people to understand the financial impact as well. A big thing is to celebrate success and celebrate the incremental steps forward. Yeah. And to reinforce when someone has been innovative, have come up with a different way of doing something, and to acknowledge that, and to really, embed that, within the organization. One thing, and I used to do this at ASA, was that, yes, you make a surplus. I used to call it a reinvestment board paper, but it was about, okay, we've got some surplus money. Where can we reinvest that for the benefit of the member? Make sure that you've got your staff on board with that, and they understand it, and they understand that's what you're doing. We've saved some money here, and here, and this is what we're going to do with it. We're delivering on our purpose. This is where we're going to go, and this is what we're doing with it.
That's really, really useful. I think, like you say, at all levels, there is that transparency and that commitment. Celebrating the learning, celebrating the successes, and I guess that acknowledgement that it's not a 1 month initiative. It's a way. It's a day-to-day way of being.
So it's a way of working. You're changing the way of working. Yeah. And that takes time. Yeah. And the eating the elephant. Yeah, is the analogy, isn't it? You can't eat the elephant in one bite. You've got to have the little bite-sized pieces, and eventually you eat the elephant. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, last question from me. So,
Mhm.
if again, out to the audience, if you do have any questions for Jodie, please get them in now. But last question for me is, what advice would you give to leaders who are feeling overwhelmed by all of this? Everything you've just talked through there. We've talked about
Mm.
the pressures, we've talked about the challenges, the opportunities, the competition, really exciting things, amazing success stories. And some of that is really inspiring. Some of it is really, okay, overwhelming. What's your advice there then to association leaders about how to deal with this?
Yeah. So, look, it's understandable that everyone feels a little bit overwhelmed. As I said, the world is moving at a very, very, very fast pace. But that's where, again, I'm going to repeat what I said before about understanding the priorities of your organization. Yeah.
Mm,
And the biggest impact for the least amount of cost and effort. And if you do that as well, if you can have some big impacts, then that helps drive motivation and enthusiasm to continue on as well. But using data, to help with
mm,
that. Yeah. And again, I think the word data, people just think, oh, a database, or I need, it doesn't have to be a database. It could be a survey. It could be someone ringing your members. It could be you looking at the financials of a product. Yeah. It doesn't, I think people get stuck on words and terminology with regard to that. But that culture piece too is really, really important. And yeah, it probably does feel a little bit overwhelming. But if you chip away at things and you chip away at things and you chip away at things, you will get there. But for me, it's prioritization,
mm,
because I know as a leader, and I'm sure other leaders, you've got 100 different asks from your members around all the activities that they all want to do, and you have all little niche groups that all want to do certain things. Yeah. We don't have the resources to be able to do everything and be everything to everybody. And that prioritization is so, so important. And for the board and for the CEO and then for the senior leaders, etc., and for the members, I guess, but to really understand what are the priorities, what's going to have the highest amount of impact for cost effectiveness with regards to that member dollar.
mm, mm. No, that's fascinating. I think thank you so much for your time today. I think there's a few things that really stood out. Prioritization, like you say,
Mm.
and again, I was thinking just very sort of personally as well about my sort of own day-to-day work, and that's something that's absolutely true for each individual. It's not just an organizational thing. We're all inundated with long to-do lists
Mm-hmm.
and an inbox that never gets to zero. So it is like, actually, no, I need to be in control. I need to prioritize these things, and that kind of gives you that, I guess, peace of mind and comforts. Like, no, there's a lot to do, but I am focused on the big things, the things that are going to genuinely make an impact. I think that mindset piece, and particularly, I liked your story there about, be 1% better
Yeah.
every day, because that's achievable. If I think about me yesterday, I can be 1% better
Mm.
today. That's not, I've got to have abs by the weekend, which is never going to happen. But 1% better, I can do that. And like you say, that consistency, that's kind of that personal contract that I can make and go, yeah, look, I can do that. I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of the overwhelmingness too, we'll go back to that, is people suddenly go, oh my God, I need a new website, need a new CRM, or I need this, or I need that. Well, you can eventually, it doesn't have to be that. My story about the just going and getting a licensed software free trial for a month and using that with the database that we had at the time, that was a game changer for us. Something really, really simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be this whiz bang technology thing that we need an app, or we need this, or we need that. It can be some really little basic things just to help you understand your business better, and to be able to then deliver, prioritize and deliver the impact.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. It's a perfect little experiment. It's contained. It's really clear what the kind of the hypothesis going into it is. It's really easy to measure whether it's been a success or not. It's got very kind of limited risk and exposure and cost, but then gives you so much you can then bounce on from after that month. Yeah. Jodie, look, thank you so much indeed on behalf of myself and the rest of the audience. Thank you so much indeed for spending some time with us today. That's been genuinely fascinating, very, very useful. To the audience, thank you very much for your questions, and for spending some of your precious time with us today. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.